Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sanov and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. U.S. President Donald Trump threatens Iran with something very tough if U.S. demands are not met. At least 10 people dead in mass shooting at school and home in Canada, authorities say. And U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev signed strategic partnership during his visit to South Caucasus. The United States and Iran have begun to enter a new phase in their diplomatic relationship, resuming nuclear talks on Friday after nearly 8 months of suspension. However, President Donald Trump has warned that failure to reach a deal could lead to tough military action.
A second American aircraft carrier strike group could be sent to the Middle East for possible military action against Iran if negotiations fail. That's according to US President Donald Trump on Tuesday. In an interview with Axios, Trump explained that either the US would make a deal with Iran or it would have to take tougher action, similar to last year's 12-day war in June. This threat follows talks between the US and Iran on Tehran's nuclear program last Friday in Oman. However, Trump also said in an interview with Fox on Tuesday that he thinks that Iran wants to make a deal with the US on its nuclear and ballistic missile programs, but reiterated it would be foolish if they did not. Meanwhile, Iran maintains a positive diplomatic stance. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghai says that the nuclear talks had shown enough consensus to continue the diplomatic process.
The Muscat meeting, which was not a long session, was in fact a half-day meeting. From our perspective, it was aimed at assessing the seriousness of the other side and the potential course of the process. Accordingly, this meeting generally focused more on the broader picture.
Meanwhile, Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani, held talks in Oman on Tuesday, days after the first round.
From the beginning, we believe that war does not resolve matters between the two countries, and the regional disputes between Iran and the West must be resolved through dialogue. It was a mistake on the part of others to believe that they could resolve issues through the language of force. This was a negative point and led to many problems in the dialogue. We believe that the many problems in the region must be resolved through dialogue between both sides.
Larijani's visit to Oman comes as Iran and the US prepare for the next round of nuclear negotiations. Tehran has said it has halted enrichment activity since the strikes on facilities last year, and always said its nuclear program is solely for peaceful purposes.
At least 10 people, including the suspect, have been killed after a shooting in a school in the town of Tumbler Ridge in the western province of British Columbia in Canada. Police say the suspected shooter, a woman, was found dead inside the school from a self-inflicted injury. More than 25 people were injured, 2 with serious or life-threatening injuries. Authorities say investigators have identified the shooter, but the suspect's motive remained unclear. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed shock over a mass shooting and suspended his trip to Europe. Prime Minister of British Columbia David Eby said the government would ensure every possible support for community members in the coming days.
Right now, information is very limited as police do their work, and the RCMP has asked for patience as they work through methodically to ensure that they are supporting families and getting to the bottom of what happened today. Police advise at this point they're still reaching out to families, still reaching out to relatives, next of kin, and so at this point aren't able to share any details about those who have passed away, but I expect that we'll be hearing that information shortly from police.
Following threats by U.S. President Donald Trump to ban the opening of a bridge connecting Canada with the United States, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the issue will be resolved after a phone call with Donald Trump. Here is more.
US President Donald Trump talked with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on the phone on Tuesday after Trump threatened to bar the new $4.7 billion bridge connecting Detroit and Windsor from opening. The Gordie Howe International Bridge links the Canadian province of Ontario with the US state of Michigan and was financed by Canada. But Trump argues the project unfairly favours Canada, saying US companies and materials played only a limited role in its construction, while Canada is expected to benefit significantly from American trade traffic.
I think the president was very clear and direct in his truth, John, but just to reiterate, the fact that Canada will control what crosses the Gordie Howe Bridge and owns the land on both sides is unacceptable to the president. It's also unacceptable that more of this bridge isn't being built with more American-made materials, even more so than what President Barack Obama committed to with the Canadians at the time, at the start of the project. He also believes that the U.S. should own at least half of the bridge, have shared authority over what passes across it, and participate in the economic benefits generated by its use.
The US president also tied the dispute to broader trade tensions, including Canadian tariffs on US dairy products and Canada's recent trade engagement with China. After the call, Carney described the discussion as positive and said both countries would resolve the issue after reassuring Trump that ownership would be shared by both sides. The bridge, named after legendary Canadian ice hockey player Gordie Howe, is expected to open in early 2026, pending final safety tests and approvals.
Migration is again at the center of Europe's political debate. European Union lawmakers backed tougher asylum rules aimed at speeding up deportations and tightening control over the bloc's borders. Supporters say the changes are necessary to manage migratory flows more effectively, while critics warn they could undermine fundamental rights. Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe and a major step toward tougher asylum rules. EU lawmakers back changes designed to speed up returns of rejected applicants and tighten control over migratory flows. The European Parliament's vote updates the bloc's asylum procedures regulation and creates a new law on migrant returns, but the package still needs final sign-off from the EU's 27 governments. The package allows EU states to fast-track asylum rejections and deportations by creating an EU-wide list of so-called safe countries where migrants can be sent back, including Egypt and Tunisia. Under the new rules, an asylum application can be refused if the person could have obtained protection in a country the EU deems safe, tightening eligibility for protection inside the bloc. Lawmakers also backed common EU standards on returns, including new obligations for people given a return order. Migrants who refuse to leave voluntarily could face prison terms for non-cooperation, and member states will be allowed to set up so-called return hubs outside EU territory that would mirror Italy's controversial offshoring deal with Albania. The measures form part of the EU's broader migration pact from 2023 and is due to be fully implemented by June. Supporters say the tougher approach is needed after more than 1 million people, mainly from Syria, arrived from 2015 to 2016, fueling voter anger and boosting nationalist parties across the continent. But humanitarian groups, plus Green and left-wing lawmakers warn the reforms risk breaching the 1951 Refugee Convention and dehumanizing EU migration policy by sending vulnerable people back to countries where they may not be safe. Overall, the EU vote underscores just how central migration has become to Europe's political battles and how far EU governments are now willing to go to speed up deportations and tighten control at their borders. Whether these tougher rules deliver order without eroding fundamental rights is a test that will play out in the months and years ahead. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
A Russian attack has killed 4 people in a town west of Ukraine's second-largest city of Kharkiv. That's according to the regional governor on Telegram. Strikes have also damaged energy infrastructure and left residents in the Kharkiv region without electricity. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Tuesday called for a faster military and local administrative response to ongoing energy disruptions. He expressed dissatisfaction with the pace in certain regions. Zelensky said that while repair crews and emergency services are working effectively, not all communities are resolving infrastructure problems on time.
This is a fundamental issue, and I urge local authorities and all services to constantly verify it. The same approach should apply to other cities and communities. Unfortunately, there are cases where full reports on problems are missing and much time is lost. Today, we reviewed such situations in Kiev, Okhtyrka, and Kryvyi Rih. Every community leader and responsible service must pay real attention to what is happening with buildings, networks, and the implementation of mandatory assistance decisions.
Anti-government protests in Albania turned violent Tuesday evening in the capital Tirana. Thousands demanded the resignation of Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Baluku over alleged corruption. The unrest highlights political tensions since Baluku was indicted for allegedly interfering in public tenders, charges she denies. It also comes as prosecutors seek to lift her immunity in parliament. The clashes have raised concerns about the country's stability and reform efforts. Following an invitation by Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Israel's President Isaac Herzog has arrived in the country's capital for a 4-day visit. His visit comes amid protests of Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog arrived in Canberra on Wednesday at the invitation of Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The 4-day visit follows a deadly shooting at a Hanukkah event at Sydney's Bondi Beach in December last year, in which 15 people were killed. Herzog was given a ceremonial welcome on arrival and is expected to travel to Melbourne later this week. The Israeli president described the trip as emotional and said it presents an opportunity for Australia and Israel to begin a new chapter in their relationship.
This visit has been very emotional. You know, when one Jew is hurt anywhere around the world, we in Israel ache and our heart misses a beat. And that is why it was so important to visit the community and express heartfelt condolences and strengthen the community. It was also an opportunity to bring the relations between our nations on a new beginning and a better future. I think the relations between us do not depend only on the issue of Israel and the Palestinians and the conflict, but has a much broader base, and we should together make sure that it's uplifted to new directions.
However, the visit has sparked protests across the country. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside Australia's Parliament House to voice opposition to Israel's actions in Palestine.
I think it's even less appropriate for him to come here because it's demonstrating his link between the Israeli government and the Australian government. And I think we should be condemning the Israeli government for all that it's done in Gaza and the West Bank.
And I feel very strongly, as to my family, that Israel's representative should not be here at the invitation of our government, considering the outrageous killing that's happened in Palestine and Gaza.
In response, Albanese called for tensions to ease, defending Herzog's visit as important for Jewish Australians in light of the Bondi attack.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to meet U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. today. The talks are set to focus on negotiations with Iran, following indirect nuclear discussions between Iranian and U.S. officials held in Muscat last week. Iranian officials have ruled out including the country's missile program in the talks and said Tehran is seeking recognition of its right to enrich uranium. Indonesia says it's preparing up to 8,000 soldiers for possible deployment to Gaza, becoming the first country to move forward under the second phase of the U.S.-brokered ceasefire agreement. Training has already begun with a focus on medical and engineering rules. The plan comes as part of a United Nations-mandated international stabilization force and follows Indonesia's joining of the U.S.-led Board of Peace. Meanwhile, medical sources say 5 Palestinians were killed in fresh violence on Tuesday. At least 581 Palestinians have been killed, with more than 1,550 injured in Israeli attacks in Gaza since the ceasefire began. Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Netanyahu's Washington visit and his push for a tougher U.S. stance on Iran. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Our top story for discussion. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has arrived in Washington, D.C. for a high-stakes meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. He's seventh in just over a year as both leaders confront mounting regional tensions and intensifying diplomatic efforts to prevent a broader Middle East conflict. Netanyahu is urging the United States to shape any new nuclear agreement with Iran to go well beyond limiting Tehran's nuclear program, calling for strict constraints on ballistic missiles, a halt to support for militant groups, and a complete cessation of assistance to terrorism. Joining us from Paris, France is Ilan Sialem, a geopolitical analyst specializing in Middle East diplomacy and U.S. foreign policy. Mr. Sialem, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So first, Ilan Sialem, how significant is this Washington meeting between Netanyahu and Trump, given they have already met multiple times?
Well, thank you for your question. I think we need to not let the frequency fool us. This is not just another meeting. It's a high-stakes, preventive diplomatic strike. This is their seventh encounter this year. The context has shifted radically since the recent Oman talks with Iran. So Netanyahu is in Washington to ensure that Trump's maximum pressure remains absolute. He's here to lock in Israel red lines, specifically on ballistic missiles, before any deal is finalized. So this is about total strategic synchronization. Netanyahu needs to be 100% sure that he and President Trump are marching in lockstep before the Board of Peace officially launches next week. So it's not a courtesy call, it's a mission to secure the future of regional order.
Mr. Sialem, Iran has publicly warned against allowing external influence over its negotiations. Could Netanyahu's visit actually complicate or undermine the diplomatic process with Tehran?
Well, absolutely. This visit is a massive X factor that could either catalyze a deal or blow it apart. From a Tehran perspective, Netanyahu isn't just an observer, he's a diplomatic saboteur. By publicly demanding that the US include missiles and proxies, he's moving the goalposts in a way that Iran has already called a non-starter. So Tehran is sending a clear message. If you let Israel lead, the talks die. So, but here it's also a geopolitical twist. Netanyahu isn't just lobbying Trump. He's challenging Trump on inner circle, meaning Kushner and Witkoff, who seems more open to a nuclear-first approach. So if Netanyahu succeeds in hardening Trump's resolve, he might inadvertently collapse the Oman process. We are witnessing a tug-of-war for the president here. If the diplomacy fails because of this visit, the alternative isn't just more sanctions. With the second US armada on the way, the alternative is kinetic escalation.
So how is the U.S. military buildup, including additional warships and assets in the Middle East, shaping the context in which these nuclear talks are taking place?
I think that we are witnessing right now what we call a gunboat diplomacy on steroids. This isn't just a routine deployment. It's the assembly of a massive armada, a huge one, designed to serve as a coercive backdrop to the Oman negotiation. So we have the US Abraham Lincoln already on station, and a second carrier, the US George H.W. Bush, reportedly en route. So the message to Tehran is loud and clear. This is a deal or strike scenario. By surging F-15E to Jordan and bolstering missile defenses, so the Trump administration is effectively telling Iran that maximum pressure is now a direct military fuse. So this buildup isn't just for defense, it's meant to strip Iran of its leverage. It forces Tehran to negotiate under the shadow of the June 2025 precedent, where the US showed it was willing to hit nuclear sites directly. So in short, the warships are there to ensure that if diplomacy fails, the military option is already fully fueled and on the flight deck.
So turning to Gaza, President Trump and Netanyahu are also expected to discuss the fragile ceasefire arrangement. What leverage does Israel currently have in those discussions?
Well, Israel leverage in the ceasefire talks has shifted from defense to total structural control. If you agree, 2 points here. The first one, there is the territorial leverage. The Israeli Defense Forces currently hold the Yellow Line, effectively bisecting the Gaza Strip. So they control over 50% of the territory, and Netanyahu is using land as a permanent bargaining chip. He has made it clear there will be no withdrawal and no reconstruction fund from Trump Board of Peace until Hamas is fully disarmed. Second point, the hostage factor has changed. With the recent return of the final remains of the Israeli hostages, Netanyahu no longer faces the same domestic pressure to compromise. He now has a free hand to pursue what he called phase 2, the total demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. So the message Netanyahu is bringing to Trump is very simple. No disarmament, no Gaza. His betting desire for a big win will align with Israel's demand to keep the military pressure until the Board of Peace can install a new non-Hamas administration.
Mr. Shalom, in your view, could the Gaza issue overshadow the Iran discussions in Washington?
It's not the question of one overshadowing the other. It's a unified strategic front. In the eyes of both Trump and Netanyahu, you cannot solve Gaza without neutralizing Iran. And you cannot isolate Iran without a stable Gaza. So they are tactically interlinked. Netanyahu's core demand is that any deal with Tehran must include cutting off the oxygen, the funding and weapons to regional proxies. So if he succeeds, he effectively bankrupts Hamas' ability to resist the Board of Peace plan. So at the same time, Trump Board of Peace is the diplomatic carrot to hit Iranian military stick. By building a new corporate-backed Gaza, Trump is attempting to prove that the US orders bring prosperity, while the Iranian axis of resistance only bring ruins. So they aren't competing for attention. This Washington meeting is about integrating both arenas into ground bargain for the Middle East, a region where Iranian influence is surgically removed and replaced by led multi-billion reconstruction projects.
So what do you think, what is the role of regional players such as Qatar, Egypt or Gulf states in both the Gaza negotiations and the broader Iran diplomatic equation?
Well, I think that we need to not look these regional players as bystanders. They are the logistical and political glue of this entire process. In the Iran question, first, Qatar and Oman have moved from simple messengers to active mediators. They recently hosted the February 6 talks and are currently floating a nuclear plus proposal, offering Iran, to be clear, a 3-year enrichment freeze in exchange for a pledge not to initiate ballistic missile use. So essentially bridge the massive gap between Trump's maximum pressure and Iran's survival. On the Gaza front, on the second file, Egypt and the UAE are the critical pillars of the Board of Peace. Egypt is the security enforcer, holding the keys to the border and the de-escalation of Hamas. And at the same time, the UAE and Saudi Arabia are the economic engine. So the message is very clear. No Arab money for reconstruction without a clear political horizon in the Middle East. So ultimately, Trump and Netanyahu know that without the Gulf checkbooks and Egypt boots on the ground, any deal made in Washington remains a paper piece. So these regional players aren't just participating, they are underwriting the risk of the new regional order.
Ilan Thialom, thank you very much for joining us from Paris and sharing your thoughtful analysis on these developments. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Welcome back to A News. Now, let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has wrapped up his visit to Azerbaijan, signaling a stronger American push into the South Caucasus. The trip marks a new chapter in security and economic ties between Washington and Baku. Here is more.
The United States and Azerbaijan have signed a new strategic partnership agreement in Baku, marking a major step in Washington's efforts to expand its influence in the South Caucasus. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev signed the deal on Tuesday alongside US Vice President J.D. Vance, who is visiting the region. The agreement covers economic cooperation, defense ties, energy security, and artificial intelligence. President Aliyev said the partnership opens what he called an entirely new phase in relations between the two countries. He confirmed plans to deepen defense cooperation and continue joint efforts on counter-terrorism and energy security.
Connectivity, as I already mentioned, with TRIP will be another contribution to peace, development and cooperation in the region. We are opening the chapter of cooperation in defense sales, which is also very promising, and of course AI data centers, which today is part of our bilateral agenda and where we already have preliminary results in interaction with the leading American companies.
Vice President Vance said that this partnership with Azerbaijan will lead to greater peace and prosperity in the region. He described the agreement as a sign of growing strategic cooperation.
There's a lot to announce. We could spend, I think, all day up here talking about some of the great things that are happening. We're going to ship some new boats to Azerbaijan to help you all with some of your territorial waters protection. We're proud to announce, and I believe I was one of the very first to fly along the new Trump Road for international peace and prosperity that will connect the two separate parts of Azerbaijan. And our hope is that that will build the kind of economic and natural resource and critical mineral cooperation that'll make it possible to really make this incredible peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia stick. I think that partnership, the partnership of the United States and Azerbaijan, will lead to greater peace and prosperity in the region. It will lead to more access to more markets for the workers of the United States of America, and it's just going to create a much better world where people are engaging in commerce with one another rather than fighting with one another.
The charter was first introduced during talks between Aliyev and US President Donald Trump in Washington last August. During that visit, Azerbaijan and Armenia reached a peace agreement aimed at ending decades of conflict.
The World Defense Show in Riyadh continues to showcase the latest technologies in the defense industry. Many leading companies are presenting their innovations at this global event. Our correspondent Nuray Mustafa, who is in Riyadh, spoke exclusively with the CEO of Foam Technology Company for Industry, a pioneering Saudi manufacturer specializing in advanced aluminum foam solutions for defense and industrial use. Khalid Al-Jalajel shared his company's goals and future plans.
To meet business partners, for sure, and to see opportunities to introduce our product. Hopefully we can get some interest because it's a global, as you've seen, it's a global community, and hopefully we can reach our goal in this World Defense Show.
Uzbekistan is expanding renewable energy projects in so-called challenging mahallas, with plans to attract $230 million to install small solar power stations aimed at boosting local incomes and improving infrastructure.
Uzbekistan plans to install small solar power plants in 1,000 mahallas as part of a broader program to reduce poverty and stimulate regional development. A mahalla is a local neighborhood community that serves as a traditional form of self-governance and social organization across the country. Under the initiative, each community will receive solar photoelectric stations with a capacity of 300 to 500 kilowatts. The facilities are expected to be transferred to mahallas on preferential 7-year terms, allowing them to generate additional income through electricity production. Funding will come from both domestic and international sources. The Fund for Reconstruction and Development is set to allocate $110 million, while another $120 million is expected from international financial institutions, bringing total investment to around $230 million. Officials say the solar rollout forms part of a wider reforms targeting 37 districts and more than 900 mahallas with difficult socio-economic conditions, alongside measures to improve infrastructure, modernize energy networks and support local entrepreneurship. It is Sivili Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A News.
Afghanistan has announced a complete ban on the import of medicines from Pakistan as tensions between the two neighbors continue to disrupt trade and border movement. The decision comes after a month of border closures that have already affected markets across the country. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Afghanistan's Ministry of Finance says the import of medicines from Pakistan is now banned at all custom points across the country. In a statement, the ministry spokesperson Abdul Qayyum Nasser said authorities would strictly monitor the borders and prevent the smuggling of medicines and other goods through illegal routes. He warned that legal action would be taken against anyone violating the new order. The ministry has also urged importers to seek alternative routes for medicines and essential goods, saying the government is working to provide a full support and facilitation to traders during the transition. The move follows months of border closures by Pakistan amid rising political and security tensions between the two countries. Key crossings along the Afghan-Pakistan frontier have remained shut, severely affecting trade flows and markets inside Afghanistan. Islamabad has accused Kabul of allowing militant groups to operate from Afghan territory, an allegation Kabul authorities firmly deny. Officials in Kabul say they do not allow anyone to use Afghan soil to threaten other countries and have urged Pakistan to address its own internal security challenges. The ban on Pakistani medicines is the latest sign of the growing strain in relations, with trade, travel and diplomatic exchanges all affected in recent months. Authorities say alternative supply routes are being arranged, but traders warn that prolonged disruptions could push up prices and limit access to essential goods. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
The European Union is planning a new wave of sanctions against Russia as Brussels changes the way it targets the networks supporting Moscow's economy. The latest proposals widen the scope, turning the attention on financial and trade routes through third countries, including Central Asian ones. A News' Fariza Kalimurzan has more.
The European Union is preparing a new expansion of sanctions against Russia, and for the first time, Central Asia has emerged as a distinct focus. According to a draft document reviewed by Reuters, Brussels plans to activate its anti-circumvention mechanism against third countries, targeting financial and technological channels that facilitate transactions with Russia. Kyrgyzstan is at the center of the proposed measures. The European Union is considering adding two local banks, Kerimet Bank and Capital Bank of Central Asia, to its sanctions list. The document cites their role in providing crypto asset services to Russia. And if approved, the banks would be barred from conducting transactions with EU individuals and companies. Similar restrictions are proposed for banks in Laos and Tajikistan. The package goes beyond the financial sector. Brussels is also proposing a ban on exports to Kyrgyzstan of metal cutting machine tools and communications equipment, including devices used for voice, image and data transmission. This would mark the first formal use of the EU's anti-circumvention tool against a third country within the sanctions framework linked to Russia's war in Ukraine. The draft also briefly expands the geographic scope of restrictions. It refers to ports in Georgia and Indonesia that the EU says were used in operations involving Russian oil. If adopted, European companies could be prohibited from any dealings with these facilities. All measures are part of the EU's 20th sanctions package and still require unanimous approval from all EU member states to take effect. The European Commission President said the sanctions cover entire sectors and tighten control over maritime transport of Russian oil, replacing the previous G7 price cap. Fariza Kalimurzana, A News, Almaty.
Staying on this, Georgia's Prime Minister stressed he supports these new sanctions on Russia and will cooperate with the EU. A News' correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
Proposals under the European Union's 20th sanctions package over the war in Ukraine would for the first time extend EU restrictions to ports located in third countries. And the initial list includes Georgia's Ulavi oil terminal. According to documents reviewed by Reuters, the European Commission, together with the European External Action Service and the EU's diplomatic service, has proposed banning EU individuals and companies from conducting transactions with the ports of Ulavi in Georgia and Karimun in Indonesia. If approved, the move would mark a significant shift in EU sanctions policy aimed at cutting off logistical routes used to transport Russian oil beyond Russia's borders. The proposed measures reflect a broader tightening of sanctions enforcement as Brussels seeks to close loopholes that allow Moscow to continue exporting energy despite Western restrictions. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that the package includes sector-wide measures and a shift away from the G7 oil price cap toward a full maritime services ban on Russian crude. For Georgia, the possible inclusion of the Ulavi port carries particular weight. The terminal is strategically important and recently handled shipments of Russian crude oil. Georgian authorities previously said that those deliveries complied with existing sanctions, noting that the vessels and companies involved were not under international restrictions at the time. Prime Minister Irakli Qorbakidze has responded by stressing that Georgia strictly adheres to the sanctions regime and is open to cooperation with the European Union. He said that the government is ready for fact-based consultations, information sharing, and detailed discussions on Ulavi, emphasizing that the port's strategic importance to the country is crucial. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll unpack the implications of U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's South Caucasus visit and the new U.S.-Azerbaijan Strategic Partnership Charter. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Now we focus on a major geopolitical development in the South Caucasus. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's historic diplomatic mission to Armenia and Azerbaijan. Vance's visit, including high-level meetings with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, culminated in a strategic partnership charter between the United States and Azerbaijan and reinforced Washington's commitment to peace, connectivity, and economic engagement across the region. While the strategic charter lays out broad avenues for cooperation, questions remain about how the political intent will translate into concrete projects and what this means for stability, regional trade, and the balance of external influence. Now we unpack these developments with our guest Orkan Nabiev, political analyst who speaks to us from Baku, Azerbaijan. Mr. Nabiev, welcome to the program.
Thank you for hosting me.
So, Orkan, how would you assess the significance of J.D. Vance's visit to Armenia and Azerbaijan in terms of shifting U.S. policy from conflict management toward long-term regional engagement?
Actually, it's a very fundamental shift. As we saw in the previous administration, they were mostly ideological promotion centered. Now we see that it's like moved towards a pragmatic model centered on trade, connectivity, and energy independence from Russia and Iran. And before the previous administration looked to this region, to the South Caucasus, as a backyard of the Russian Federation. Right now, the United States, the new administration, puts the big mark that it's this is independent region, and the United States has their own interests in the region.
So the strategic partnership charter between the United States and Azerbaijan outlines cooperation on energy, security, connectivity, and digital innovation. What are the most consequential provisions of the charter in your assessment?
It's a most important thing. It's a security assistance of this charter because, like once announced that delivery of the new United States patrol boats to the strengthens Azerbaijani's Coast Guard. Azerbaijan's main weakness it was from the Caspian Sea. Caspian Sea was the less secured zone of Azerbaijan, and it's also the major interest of the United States, considering our north and the south neighbors, and considering that Azerbaijan is a gateway to the Central Asia. And coming from that, security board patrol boats, and also the strengthening the Azerbaijani Caspian coast patrol is a very important. But if we will consider another part, it's like, yes, of course, so we can speak about the trade, about Azerbaijan being an energy anchor of the region, and Azerbaijan as a recognized the same level partner with the United States in the region. So Azerbaijan became the focal point for the United States.
The Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity initiative, previously referenced in Armenia, U.S. and Armenia-Azerbaijan frameworks, now appears directly within the U.S.-Azerbaijan strategic dialogue. How significant is this inclusion diplomatically and practically?
Diplomatically, it is. We talked about this a lot, and now we have the more details about this. It's like 99 years old, 99 years project, which means like a first 50 years, 74% of this route is depending. It's a part of the United States, and the United States gets these shares of the 74%. This is a 43-kilometer multimodal route, which, and we thought first it will be only the road for railways and for the autobahns, but it's more than this. It's considering the oil. It's oil pipelines will pass from it. Also gas pipelines will pass from through it. Also the fiber optic internet high connection, fiber optic, the cables also will pass from it. It means that United States are very interested in managing this route, and from the practical perspectives, it means that neither Russia nor Iran will have the influence over this route. So also Russia wanted to influence this route, and Armenia said that this route is between the United States and Armenia. This is not Russia has nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. And for Azerbaijan, it's the most important thing that Azerbaijan will have access to Nakhchivan, and this will be the biggest part of the central corridor. So from the practical perspective, it's very important, and diplomatically, United States puts their own finger on this part of the globe, saying that this region now is a internationally recognized part of the. It's not a part of the under influence of Russia or Iran. This is an internationally United States interest on this region.
Mr. Nabiev, how might U.S. and private sector investment, particularly in digital infrastructure and connectivity, reinforce the middle corridor's long-term viability?
We saw that the United States brought a big investment to this region. First of all, if we talk about Armenia, they promised that they will bring the $9 billion of investment, and they also started the second stage of the NVIDIA factories in Armenia, which means that they will bring the AI infrastructure to this region, and saying that this is the most important thing to the region. The secondary for Armenia, it's a small nuclear reactors, which is the more ecological, more safe, and it's safer than the old Soviet nuclear reactor that existed in Armenia. Azerbaijan considered this old Soviet nuclear reactor and Azerbaijan had their own concerns regarding this. So United States understood it, and they offered their own new technologies to Armenia, as well as to Azerbaijan, where Azerbaijan is the first of all, the big data centers. Azerbaijan has their, we have the big capacity for data centers because we have the big capacity of solar energy, we have big capacity of wind energy, and it's where we have the more energy that we can have the big data centers and the data analytical centers in Azerbaijan. Secondly, Azerbaijan is interested also in military new technologies in the military sphere. So it is also the very good connection with the United States. And as you know, that Azerbaijan also that has a Starlink centers, it's new opened, and this is also the one of the biggest part of the United States digital digital products that they can sell to Azerbaijan.
Also, how do you interpret Russia's response to intensified U.S. engagement? Does this visit mark a pivot away from traditional Russian influence in the South Caucasus?
Russia is losing their traditional influence in the South Caucasus, and as more as Russia stuck in the Western front, in the Ukrainian front, and as much as they show their incapability militarily solve this conflict, and they try with a different methods to solve this conflict, as well as terrifying the civilians in the Ukraine, bombing the energy infrastructure, civilian infrastructure. As much as the Russia lose their influence in the South Caucasus, we all start to see how the Russia is became weaker and weaker, and this is also the Russians also behavior against Azerbaijan during with the salvation of the Azerbaijan Airlines plane catastrophe that happened and over the Russian sky. So considering these things that Russians behavior, Russians weakness, they start to lose their influence in the South Caucasus, and they try to connect to this TRIP project. They try to connect from the different sides to the region, as well as sending the grains wheat through Azerbaijan to Armenia. But it's nothing more than there's just tries. But Russia, for sure, for the next 10 years, for the decades, they lost their influence in the South Caucasus.
Orkan Nabiev, thank you for your insights and analysis on these developments. Your expertise helps us understand the deeper strategic implications for Azerbaijan, Armenia, and the wider region. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates, and thank you for joining us.